Washington's pledge to retaliate against attacks on its troops in the Red Sea is escalating tensions dramatically across West Asia. But does it mean a wider war is in the offing? Washington is facing a dilemma. On one hand, it needs to present a strong response to the deadly attack on the U.S. military. On the other, it needs to find the right balance to prevent a major escalation in the Tinderbox region. In an address after the attack in Jordan, U.S. President Joe Biden blamed the radical Iran-backed militant groups operating in Syria and Iraq and pledged retaliation at a time and place of their choosing. Iran has denied direct involvement in the attack in Jordan, but over the past decades, U.S. threats have heightened the risk of a direct conflict between Iran and America many times. Biden's political rival says there have been over 160 attacks on American troops since Israel's assault in Gaza. They've accused the White House of not doing enough to deter Tehran. Both Washington and Tehran have said they do not want to get into a full-scale war. Both Republicans and Democrats have stayed away from advocating an outright confrontation with Iran. But with Republicans urging Biden to hit Iran, Biden cannot afford to portray weakness as he struggles with low approval ratings ahead of a likely rematch with former President Donald Trump. The region is already a battlefield, with a U.S.-led coalition exchanging fire with Tehran-backed Houthis in Yemen and the threat of an Israeli-Hezbollah war in Lebanon. Any escalation in the Gulf will trigger a spike in oil prices and global inflation, far more damaging to the president's re-election prospects than some calling it from old soldiers and Republican senators. At the same time, U.S. officials remain hopeful they are inching closer to reaching a hostage agreement that would include a lengthy pause in the fighting in Gaza. And they hope an easing of tensions in that region would do some, difference. U.S. officials believe a longer pause in the fighting could provide space for more humanitarian aid to flow into Gaza. It could also facilitate fruitful discussions about the future of Israel's campaign against the Hamas. John Erath is a senior policy director for the Center for Arms Control and Non-Proliferation. Is now joining us live from Washington, D.C. Mr. Erath, thank you very much for making time for us and welcome to WION World as One.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
If the tensions in West Asia persist and the U.S. becomes unable to neutralize the threats, what will be the repercussions of that going forward? And what if the U.S. now decides to enter into war with Iran? How damaging would that be? Can America afford that?
I think a war with Iran would be highly unlikely. As you said a few minutes ago, neither side wants a war at this point. It is not in the interests of either side to enter into an open conflict. Iran has demonstrated this repeatedly by its use of proxy groups. Iran does not act against the United States directly. It uses these groups to do so where it can preserve some level of deniability. So I think this is going to be much more the pattern that you will see in the coming months.
Mr. Erath, President Joe Biden simply said, "We will respond" after the death of the U.S. troops in Jordan. With that in mind, will the U.S. be forced to join the war in West Asia, or what else might prompt America to be enjoined in the war or dispute?
There is not a U.S. interest in joining a war anywhere right now. And so I think it's highly unlikely that that would happen. What you're much more likely to see is a very limited military response, probably in the form of some sort of attack against the armed camps where these militants have used as bases for the strikes on U.S. facilities.
Mr. Erath, the U.S. Defense Department has vowed all necessary actions to defend its troops. What do these actions entail?
As I said, I think it would be limited strikes against some of the bases that the terrorist groups are using for their attacks on U.S. facilities. It could also involve improved defensive measures, missile defenses, anti-rocket technology, things like that.
All right, Mr. Erath, just before I let you go, you keep on saying response response by the United States. What kind of response is this, and what do you think the world would, point to the to the United States when they actually respond using the army or the military in their country?
I think that this is a long-term pattern. It goes back to even to the 1990s, where there have been attacks on U.S. facilities and at times when appropriate military responses as well. It's not anything that is terribly different from what we have seen in the past. And the reactions, positive and negative, are going to be very much in line with what we have seen in the past as well.
Mr. John Erath is a Senior Policy Director for the Center for Arms Control and Non-Proliferation. Mr. John, thank you very much for your insights and for talking to WION World is One today.
You're very welcome.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.